Well, welcome everybody to today's episode. We are so glad that you're joining us, and we are live right now. And so we have the Parkway boys here. We have Tim Hamilton joining us. But before we jump into today's episode, just kind of wanted to ask around the table, do a little, just a round table here of like, how was your weekend?
Yeah, mine was great.
Yeah?
Swimming in Lake Michigan,
Lake Michigan, baby.
throwing the kids around.
Temperature's
Yeah.
about 80
Yeah.
degrees or something now, isn't it?
It's really warm.
Yeah, it was pretty warm.
Still
We were
seaweedy?
we were about an hour and a half north of here, so it was a little cooler. It was
Okay.
probably 75, 78.
Did you
So-
ride any rip currents?
No.
I think the lake
That's good.
actually did a little inversion like yesterday.
Yeah.
Did it really?
So like all the
Flipped
temperatures
over.
went down, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Todd?
Went swimming in Placid Waters, the home lake.
Yeah.
Pretty quiet.
Okay.
No kids around. No guests. Just kind of hanging out with the missus.
Yeah. Relaxing then.
Yeah.
You know,
A
no
little different for us.
no grandkids to drive you
No.
nuts. All right,
No, we-
good.
I don't know. Must scared them away for us.
Yeah.
Happens.
That's good. Tim, how about you?
That was a nice. We had family in from out of town. For
Okay.
a good chunk of the weekend. So
Nice.
playing
Cool.
playing in the pool, had the yard games out, little
Yeah.
cornhole, all that kind of good stuff. little croquet.
Yeah.
croquet.
Ooh.
Nice. A
Played
little
that in years.
croquet.
Croquet.
Yeah, it's
You hit that
dangerous.
through the hoops,
Oh
right?
yeah. It's, yeah,
The
you know,
little-
yeah. Give mallets and balls to your small children. Let them run around the yard and hit each other. It's great.
Nice. Did you videotape that
No, I did
for
not.
future?
That's
I've got-
awesome.
I've got plenty of those. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I actually saw somebody, a friend of mine on Facebook, I guess they had a cornhole tournament, and him and his buddy won, and he's like flexing the money that they won. I guess they all
Nice.
threw in, and so he's
Money
like,
at stake.
yeah, I got the Benjis, baby.
Nice.
Me, myself, I was in Ohio. I actually took last Friday off, and my mother-in-law is looking to sell her home. So we went over there, helped her kind of organize everything, pack everything. I actually drove the U-Haul back Saturday night, unloaded it yesterday with a bunch of buddies at a storage unit. And so that was my weekend. Yeah, just doing the
Sweating.
family thing, sweating.
Sweating.
Sweat equity.
It's a lot of work.
Sweat equity, baby.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Putting
absolutely.
in the time.
Yeah. Well, today we have Tim Hamilton here with us. We're going to be diving into this is kind of a part 2 of our previous episode where we talked about when is it right to bring an integrator on a project? When should you maybe consider doing it yourself? But today we're going to expand that and talk about when is it right to maybe even bring a consultant like yourself, Tim, on a project. When is that right? And so, but before we dive into that, Tim, why don't you just for our listeners and our viewers, maybe just give us a little bit of your background, kind of where you started, what you do today, and yeah, we just love to get to know you a little bit.
All right, sounds good. And you guys might not even know everything. Todd probably knows a fair bit about my background.
See, here we are.
I am.
The old
I know.
jokes
The
are
old-
going to start already.
No.
Right off the bat.
We just have a little more history than
That's okay.
than the rest of us.
That's okay. I'm known as the old guy on this panel, so that's good.
You're seasoned.
Somebody's
Yeah,
got to be the
right.
senior.
You're
you
like
know?
a fine wine,
That's
Todd.
right.
Like a fine
Yeah,
wine.
okay, move on.
Moving on. So I started out in college. I had the chance to start doing some tech stuff with the Chapel program over at Hope College here in Holland, Michigan. And did that a little bit in my junior year and into my senior year. Kind of worked my way into a part-time job with them for 5 years after that. So it was one of those great jobs where they pay you part-time, you work full-time, and they pay you less than part-time. So it's more like a paid internship.
It's kind of like
really.
when I was
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
for my dad. Same
Yeah,
kind of
same
deal.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I know how that works. Yeah.
But it was great because we did a ton
Sorry,
of stuff.
Dad. I love you if you're watching.
Thanks, Todd. Get the little family quirk in there. Yeah. No, it was a great gig. Honestly, I had the chance to learn from a whole bunch of different things. Went to a lot of places, set up, tear down gear, did sound stuff, did video stuff, did lighting stuff, in a whole bunch of different spots. So it was a great internship in many respects to get your feet wet and you figure out why you do a lot of the things that you do and why you don't do a lot of the things that you really
Sure.
shouldn't do.
Sure.
Did a little time at a little music center, a little MI store for a little bit, and also worked for a rental staging company for a while. Had the chance to do a little bit of, you could call it installation work at the same time. Did some design, did some install stuff, and so I kind of messed around in that venue for a year or two, and then went to work for a contractor. Spent about 3 years as an integrator, and discovered that's really where I like to design stuff. I like to put it on paper. I like to figure out how to make it go together. I can hang it from the ceiling. I can pull it through the wall. I can do those things, but that's not what I really like to do.
Right.
I'd much rather spend a lot of time figuring out on paper and working the details. So I was in there for 3 years. Had the chance to go work at a consulting firm. After that, was there for a little over 13 years, and then have been at my own firm now for a little over 3 years. So I've kind of been in various parts of the industry doing things, and the design of usually larger projects and spots where you have to put it on paper and do a bunch of stuff. That's really the world that I like to live in, and the stuff that I like to do.
All right, you got to plug your current company. What's the
Yes,
name of it?
yeah. So what are you doing now?
Current company is called Hamilton AV Design. Don't let the name fool you. We do a little more than just AV. So we do AV and we do theatrical lighting. We'll do a little bit of network stuff too.
Okay.
And I would call it some very light acoustics. When people just want to figure out, how many dead cats to hang on the wall. We're happy to work on some of that sort of stuff. I have some partners I work with who we team up with when we need to do things that deal with more high-end acoustical work. So if you're doing a full studio, if you need to talk about vibration isolation, noise isolation, you need to talk about mechanical noise control, those sorts of things. I've got some guys that I bring in to work with on those kinds of projects as well. So
Awesome.
we try to offer a wide variety of services to folks, and yeah. Sometimes we do big work, sometimes we do small work, and that's all right.
All right. Well, Tim, before we, because a lot of people usually plug things at the end of an episode, but maybe they won't make it that far.
Maybe.
They'll be like, I ain't gonna order this. Nah. So where can people find you?
The easiest spot to find me is www.hamiltonavdesign.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't do hamiltonav.com. You'll get some company out of Pennsylvania. So
okay.
Make sure you do hamiltonavdesign.com. And if you want to communicate directly, just tim@hamiltonavdesign.com will be perfect.
Boom. That's what's up. All right. Well, let's dive in. So I'm actually going to go to Todd first because, Todd, you're the seasoned pro here, man.
Yeah. What's your question?
Well, my question is we need to make a little bit of a segue from our last episode into this episode. And so I think you would be the perfect person to kind of give a little bit of a rundown of what we spoke about and kind of what we want to dive into in this episode. And again, this is pretty loose. We don't have a huge agenda, but we also want to give some realistic real-world scenarios to people when they're actually really considering their next project. So would you mind just giving a rundown of maybe what we spoke about and what we want to head into?
That was a whole week ago. I'll try to remember.
Okay.
But you guys got to help me. I think mostly we just talked about, when to go outside of your own group of it, whether that's a church or a business or a company, of when you go outside to seek expert, help, and how do you get that? When's a good time to do it? When do you use internal people like that? And we talked about it not just in the church market, but because we're all pretty passionate about church, we tend to end up in that subject quite often. But there, there's other areas as well. So, and at Parkway, we're not. It's not our way is always the best way. There are other avenues, and I've worked with Tim for a while. I've known of Tim for quite a while. Tim and I were competitors for a while even. Yeah. And I've developed a respect probably now that I didn't have
back in the day.
20 years. We probably wouldn't sit down and agree on this, but over the years you find there's times when it's better. There's a lot of recognizing when the right time is and who to do what with, I think is really important. Okay. So, I could give a scenario of one that I tend to do, but last week we got into a lot of stuff more about contractors and what we do and how we do it and what we offer and what we don't offer. But I think it's great that our viewers get this perspective from a consultant. And there's a gray area. We can all agree. There's do I go consultant or go directly with an integrator? And in cases we're kind of fighting for the same work in a gray area in the middle. But there's certainly things that are more consultant driven and more right and more contractor or integrator type thing. So I think we just wanted to hammer through that. And literally, we have not rehearsed this. We're not exactly sure where it's all going to go, but I think it's at the end of the day, I think it's all going to be good. You know? So I guess to start things off, at least to get the conversation going, you know, probably the thing that I've seen, and I've been, you know, churches was a big part of what I did for many years. It was my only clientele. That was my market area that I worked with. I don't do as much of that anymore because I got these two young guys that are better at it than I am these days, so I rely on them to do a lot of that stuff. But, you know, the thing that used to bother me the most when I think back through my career is the church or business. You know, I don't want to just pick on houses of worship, but, you know, there'd be a committee of people, and they decide they need a new sound system, right? Let's just be generic, whether that's speakers, you know, mixers, whatever. Let's just say a whole new sound package. So they look at it like buying a car, right? They call 3 people in, 3 different people, and they'd have them put this proposal together. And at to keep it short, at the end of that, they'd have 3 envelopes sitting on their desk or on their table, and no one on the committee really knows what needs to happen with audio. And they'd look at all 3 of those. Nobody could really distinguish. And of course, everyone knows if you put 3 audio guys together in the same room and ask them a question, you're never going to get the same answer, right? Because there's just a lot of ways to do things, right? And everyone's going to take a little bit different opinion. That committee wouldn't know what to do, so typically what they would do is grab the cheapest one, right? And sometimes that's good. Many times it's not good.
Sometimes it's not.
In that scenario, if I go to meet with a church and they're going to tell me to do that, and if the church or business is thinking that their bottom line, their biggest thing to accomplish is at the end of the day, they just want to pick the lowest price. If that's where their talent lies, right? If that's the best they can do, they absolutely need to hire a consultant. If that's because what's going to happen is, and Tim, jump in anytime, that consultant is going to he's going to provide the expertise, and then at the end of the day, the church just has to say, well, all we got to do is pick the cheapest price because everyone's looking at the same thing. You know, that's just one scenario. I know we'll get into a lot more, but that one has always bothered me. And if I run into that, I say, listen, do yourself a favor, okay? Just call Tim. Okay, call a consultant, have them do that. Because as a contractor or as an integrator, what that means is my chances of getting that work is diminished. And because we don't charge for doing our design work, that's not what we do. Contractors, integrators make our money when we install systems. That's where our money is made. We don't charge for the design. Right, that's included. Consultants do charge for the design. They don't charge for the install. So that's where the difference comes in. And if I'm doing a design for something I got a 33% or less chance of getting, a lot of times those end up in wasting my time.
It's a big risk on your part.
It is.
From an investment perspective.
Especially depending on the size of the project. So in that case, if I know that my customer is going to go through that process, I pull back right away and I just try to get them to hire a consultant right out of the gate.
Because you know it's going to be more cost-effective, not only money-wise, but in their time. Instead of going to 3 different companies, having to re-explain what you're trying to do, just go with one person, then it gets dispersed, and it cuts cost on everybody's end.
Yeah, and I just jump in. You see that I could jump in?
Yeah, please.
Go for it.
You're the guest.
Yeah.
Everyone knows I tend to talk too much. So.
No, I would say there's a couple things I see churches do in the same vein where they don't say the same thing to each of the contractors when they come in because they don't want to meet with everybody at the same time.
Right.
So you're going to meet with one, and by the time you get to the third one, you figured out all the stuff that you really wanted to have.
Right.
So the first guy gets different than the second guy because the third guy. So then inevitably you're going to get 3 different types of proposals, you know, that are going to be different, and no fault to the first one or the third one or whatever, but you know, you're going to get a very different kind of level.
Yeah,
that's just part of the process.
I never thought of that.
That's just part of the process. Yeah, that's great. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And that church's opinion is probably changing because every guy is going to add a little information. That's a good idea. Then we'll tell the next guy. The poor first guy is
he's still back doing his quote based on the first
remind me
guy.
to be the third guy.
Yeah.
Always be the third
when
one
are
in
you
the
meeting
door.
with the other 2?
Yeah, right.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact that I mean, it's a committee. You're going to meet with 3 different contractors 3 different days. Not everyone on the committee is going to show at the same time.
Right.
So you're going to get a different
Mhm.
story from the people on the committee because it's a group of people. You're going to get a slightly different version depending on who shows up.
Some
on that
people on the
particular day.
committee are at the first meeting, some people are at the second, and maybe all of them are at the third.
Yep.
Right? And so
So if you're the third guy at
changes.
that point, you're going to get the full list of what everybody wants. Now you're going to be low or high.
right.
You're
right.
going to be
right.
high.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I did not want to say that you are you just pick the low price. There's, talk a little bit about the value you bring,
Yeah.
to a scenario like that. I mean, it's not just pick the low
Well,
price.
yeah. So let me throw a couple of thoughts, and we can kind of riff off that a little bit as we go. But one is, so I do have folks that end up where they've already got their 3 numbers. They got their 3 quotes from different people, and one of the services that I provide for folks is to say, okay, you've been through the process. You don't want to rehash it again. That's great. I will happily evaluate the quotes that you've gotten from people, and I will give you honest, straightforward, unbiased feedback as to what I think of the various proposals. And when I look at those, I can usually tell, okay, yeah, this one's going really low. Maybe they were the first ones that came in and talked about stuff. This one's got all the stuff that everybody wants to have in it. Okay, so I will then work with folks and say, hey, here's what you're getting in this. Here's what you're getting in here. Here's what you're getting in this. And honestly, if this quote has most of what you want to have in it, then I would suggest you didn't figure out that you needed to have the stage box or something, until you got to the last quote. So the third one's the only one that's got that on there. Well, the quote that you really want to have is the first one. Great. Let's just add the stage box to that. And if people don't know the part numbers, if they don't know the stuff, they don't realize that's what's all really going there. So one service that we provide sometimes is just to, give people some evaluation of the stuff that they already have. Even better than that is, okay, you don't want to hire maybe a consultant to design everything for you. Let me at least help you write an RFP. We'll put together a request for proposals or request for price so that we can get a document that we can send out to a couple of different people. And then you walking in the door, okay, I'm going to bid this place. I'm going to put a number on this or whatever. And you've got a 1 or 2 page document that says, I'm supposed to provide a stage box. I'm supposed to provide a mixing board. I'm supposed to provide an amplifier and a processor
Right.
and a speaker and
Just
all
gives
the
you a
wires to install
baseline.
it. So then you at least know,
Yeah.
okay, this is what I'm.
Well, it puts in writing what
exactly what everybody's supposed to have.
people may be telling everybody
Exactly.
when they're walking in.
And-
So this
Right.
is everyone's working off of the same.
Working from the same base points,
Yeah,
right.
and normally we hash that with the committee a little bit at that point. We put together a document, everybody at the committee talks about it, and then everybody can figure out, oh, I think it ought to be 8 mics. I think it ought to be 10 mics. I think it ought to be, 27 wireless mics. No, you're not doing that.
You could,
you can have those
Yeah.
conversations, and then honestly, it's not sucking up as much of the time as contractors are trying to figure out what it is, because as you walk in the door, and if there's nothing like that up front, you have to tease that out, from
Sure.
the committee, from the group, and figure out what is the project really. Is this supposed to be big or small, and where is their price point really?
Right. What's your budget?
Yeah,
Right.
and to have had some of that groundwork laid, suggest at that point, if I write that sort of a thing, I'm not putting manufacturers on it unless somebody really has a strong opinion, and then you can put whatever your best
see.
manufacturer is for it, and contractors can have their thing and put together a proposal, and then they can evaluate it after the fact. So I think that's a valid way for somebody who may not want to think they want to spend a lot of money to try and have somebody design it all, but it gets you a whole lot further down the road
Sure.
to getting I'm not going to say apples to apples bids and quotes, but it's going to get you something that's at least
Be a little more balanced.
everybody's balanced and has the same
Yeah.
info walking in.
Let
It's a more fair playing field. I
Well,
think
in
for
that
contractors.
scenario, you're just an unbiased opinion.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
You're not biased to equipment. You're not biased to a contractor or an
Exactly.
integrator. You're an unbiased opinion to the committee, because let's face it. And it's varying degrees of this, but we're salespeople.
Yeah.
So even though we're really not, sometimes you get perceived. Some people think, as soon as the sales guy walks in the door, he's trying
Right.
to get his
He's trying to
hands in
sell
your
something.
pocket,
Right.
Tries to sell as
Right.
much as he
Right.
can.
He's
to you.
after
Yeah.
your wallet. He doesn't care. Now, obviously, all 3 of us here can talk about that. That's not what we do.
Nope.
Our reputation is not that. We try to come up with, and we talked a lot about that last week. The
Right.
right product, the right situation for the right service. We sell you what you need, not more than what you need or less, but sometimes people they see salesmen and all they see is lips move, and they
Right.
don't. So, and those are perfect.
And I get that. I think
opportunities.
we can all get that, right?
If I
course.
sense that in a church, I know that that's where a guy like Tim can come in and at least talk to those people and say, and I've called Tim before. I've
Mhm.
come out of a 3 situation. I'll call him and say, Tim, just call these people. If you could spend 2 hours with them,
Mhm.
especially the ones that I see that are walking down a bad trail.
Right.
They're like,
We've
head
run
case.
into that together. You
Man,
know?
nothing bothers me worse. Well, there probably are some things that bother me worse, but in context of what we're talking about is walking into a church and looking and go, that doesn't look very old. It's not exactly what I would do, but we bought it last year. It just doesn't do what
It's not working.
I'm
right.
like, oh man.
Yep.
Because, we all attend a church.
Yep.
We all pull our Benjamins out of our wallet and
Yeah.
drop it in the plate like
We all
everybody
tithe,
else. And
offerings, yeah.
Mhm.
it's just a thing. It just bugs me to see people not get what they thought they were
Well,
going to get.
and that's why I
So,
got into doing this stuff in the first place, honestly. And probably similar to you guys, I
Sure.
would go to
Mhm.
churches and see where people got, stuff that was either way too expensive or just not the right application or
Or
whatever.
overkill or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, no, so that irks me to see that
Yeah.
as well. My goal at the end of the day, particularly in church markets, but really with everybody I work with, is I want to see people get stuff that's going to actually work well.
Right.
I want to see it meet their need, meet their budget, and actually function well for them for the long term. I hate it when people have to rip stuff out.
Yeah. So,
a year after it goes
and
in.
usually those are situations where, I wouldn't say we're high. We tend to, Parkway is not, we don't go around advertising to be the cheapest people out there. That's not our MO.
That's not what we do.
We're going to give you a great value, but it's going to be a good quality product, good service.
Well, we also want that relationship too.
Who let the duck
you know,
alone?
Yeah, we absolutely want.
We
want
to build that relationship
Exactly.
and walk
Absolutely.
alongside of you. And
But as
you
as a
know,
There's
segue,
situations you
I-
can see where a church is, it's the guy in your church that thinks he's an audio guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
That wants to do it himself,
Mhm.
and he has this little side gig company going on, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're,
yeah.
And they're gonna, and you're like, oh no, don't do that. I'm a sales guy. I can't talk the church out of that, but Tim, as a unbiased opinion to something like that, can be. Which is a great idea.
Well-
That can exist in a large church too, which is another
Absolutely.
great application.
Yep.
You got a guy that owns a company that goes to a church
Mhm.
like my church, but if my church didn't like or had questions about what I was doing in my own church, a great way would be bring in
a
an
consultant.
unbiased.
Bring in
Because if
somebody
you
from
bring
outside.
in my competitor, I'll guarantee you what he's going to say.
right. He's gonna be
Yeah.
like, you
It
should
will not
totally
be
go
good.
with me.
Billing
instead.
that guy?
Yeah.
Oh man,
You don't
Ron,
want
the
to
other
do
way.
it.
No, but one of the things I'd like to clarify is that not only Parkway, but Tim, your company, we don't just do churches, we do schools, stadiums, an array of kind of projects, right? All over
Yep.
the map.
Yep.
One thing that I'm interested in hearing from you, Tim, is when do you take the liberty? Because maybe a church is trying to be budget conscious,
Mhm.
right?
Is
but-
there ever a time when a church isn't being budget
Right.
conscious?
Well, I mean,
Or shouldn't.
no.
shouldn't be.
Well,
Yeah.
for example, I know a church right now that we're getting together with. They're like, we want L acoustics.
Yeah.
Like that's happening.
Yeah.
So that's not even
It's
a
not
question.
negotiable.
They're not even looking for a B option,
Right,
right?
right.
Maybe in other areas they are
Sure.
for this upgrade. But for example, say a church has a certain budget.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, we're going to go we really feel like we want to go with option A because it's the cheapest. But maybe that option, let's say, has a C grade PA system,
Mhm. Mhm.
okay?
Mhm.
And the the third quote that they got had the A Ferrari PA, but some downgraded stuff on the other end of things. Where do you come into play in talking them into, well, I think you should maybe consider this and not really save on this, but maybe you could save money on this other side of it. Like, can you explain to us a little bit about that process? Like, how much is there a give and pull,
Sure.
as you're talking and consulting with an
Yeah, and
organization?
It really depends on the individual organization or church, because some places have people that are very, very knowledgeable, very
Mhm.
smart, and know their stuff, and they know what they want and why they want it.
Mm-hmm.
And other places don't have that kind of knowledge base, And
Yeah.
so part of my job at that point usually is to help explain that to folks and say, Yeah, your application, I think you want to do acoustics, and that's great. This is a conference room, and so maybe that's not where you need to have a line array.
Yeah.
I mean, to take the extreme.
Right.
So there's occasional times.
Now there's a salesman right there.
That's right.
That was Todd's job.
See?
Yeah.
Acoustics everywhere.
Hey, you're salesmen too. Throw me in there.
So it really depends on what that is, but I like to try and establish with folks up front, okay, really where's your budget range? Not because I'm not trying to sell you as much as I can, but I want to be realistic with folks about what it is that you can actually afford. So that if if your budget for a project really is, we've set this out as a church or as another institution, we're going to spend $100,000, and your main speakers and amplifiers are going to take $100,000. I think we should have that discussion before you've got all your quotes and bids and everything in hand.
That's great.
Let's figure
Right.
that out up front.
Like, should you wait a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Save more money.
Save some money,
Mhm.
fundraise, whatever you need to do. Or do you say, I know that's what you'd really like to have, as far as either maybe your mixing board or maybe your front of house stuff, whatever. Maybe we need to reconsider that.
Got it.
If this really is the budget you're going to have, let's get ourselves into the ballpark of where you want to be before we go and try and put a whole system together and then really cheap out some stuff on the other end that you're going to regret in the long run. Or maybe you just don't do that part right now. If you've got something that's still functioning, that's a mixing board, and your PA is really going to be that kind of money, okay, let's just defer that for another 2 years. Yeah, it's an old board, but does it still work? Yeah.
And
okay,
next
it
year
still
you
works.
can get a new mixer.
Maybe next year we
Sure.
do that part.
Right.
Work to help people to either look to phase stuff, but establishing what's realistic, because I'm sure you guys have all been there at some point where people didn't really want to tell you what their budget was, and they said they wanted all this, and you came with the quote, and then you find out afterwards that their real number was half of what it is that you put together, and it's like, well, if you told me that's what we were at up front, we would have had a different conversation. So
Yeah, and why don't they tell us that?
Yeah, why don't
Yeah.
they?
You know why? Because they think we're going to design exactly to what they need so we
Yeah.
can get every one of their dollars.
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
tell
I know, I
people
know.
Right up to the penny.
The funny thing is I will tell people that my goal is, tell me what your budget is. I'm going to try and get you the most equipment that I can for that dollar. For whatever your applications is that we've talked about, okay, here's all the things you think you need it to do or want it to do, great. I'm going to try and get you the most amount of equipment that I can at the end of the day to get in and make that happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes people feel more comfortable talking to the consultant about the dollar signs on that because I'm not perception wise, okay, treading on thin ice here.
No, yeah.
Perception wise, I'm not the salesman who's getting paid on commission and just wants to spend every dollar.
Right.
Right.
And I can be in a spot where I can tell folks, hey, your budget's $100,000. What you're telling me that you need, you don't need to spend all of that money. Or on the flip side to say, actually,
You need more
you
money.
need way more money
Yeah,
for what
yeah.
what you've said you wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's usually what it is. It's rarely do people we need to spend half of what somebody has said that they have available. Occasionally has happened, but that's a rarity, I would say overall.
Well, and what you do is more than just kind of spec out equipment.
Yep.
Why don't you explain a little bit about what it looks like to kind of meet with a consultant and the services that are provided?
Yeah, sure.
It's more than just like, get this speaker system and this console. What more is kind of involved?
Yeah,
with
no, we usually spend a lot of time actually talking with people up front, because most times when people are hiring a consultant like myself, they know they need a system. They know that they need parts and pieces. They may have technical staff that have a pretty good idea of what that stuff is, but usually there's several other people in the process that need to be educated, that need to have. So you may have a financial person, you may have a CEO or a superintendent or a lead pastor, other people that are in the process that they may know and trust their technical person, but they may still have questions and want to be able to talk. So I like to sit down with the whole group of stakeholders as much as possible, talk through, hey, what do you think needs to happen? What do you think needs to happen? What are your concerns and things that need to go on to make this this project be successful? Talk through. I've got a standard list of a whole bunch of questions that I ask people, and some of them don't ever apply.
Right.
But sometimes I ask the question and I'll say something like it's a church, and maybe it's a really traditional church, and I'll have a question on there. I'll say, do you need a production intercom system so that technical people can talk to each other? And I'm thinking, this is this is a traditional church. There's no way. And they go, yeah, we never can talk. We always want to talk to somebody that's sitting in the front row. Okay, well, all right. So, yeah, I wasn't going to put intercom system into this, but
I guess
if
you
you
need
need one, then we need to consider that needs to be part of it. Talk through that. I take all that information. I then write up a whole narrative summary, and I talk through all the parts and pieces and say, here's all the stuff you told me you wanted to do for your sound system, your video system, your lighting system, other ancillary stuff. We'll put it all on paper. I'll get some preliminary budgets of what I think it takes to do those types of things and circulate that back. Everybody can read it. Everybody can talk about it. Now, it takes time, to write all that stuff up and to make that be something that's personable and easy for folks to read. And usually it's
because not everybody's technical.
No, and so it's
Right.
almost always a document where you're trying to walk that line. I'm
Yeah.
quite certain you guys have done that. Okay,
Yes,
it
we
needs to
have.
be technical enough for the tech people to be able to feel like it's addressing their issues,
Yeah.
but not so techie to where
Mhm.
the eyes glaze over for the folks that aren't the techies.
Right.
Right.
So everybody comments on that. We revise, we redraft, we do what we need to make it talk like what it's supposed to be, and then we go through. We do a design. I usually do a preliminary design where we start to put together some drawings and get the big picture of all the stuff that's there. Once we've got a good picture of that, we sit back down, talk with folks again, and say, okay, we talked with you what it was going to be. Here's what it's starting to look like. Is this still looking like what it's supposed to look like? What everybody's feeling comfortable, what it's supposed to be? Everybody's good? Okay. Now we'll go and we'll finish the rest of the documents, make it finished. Review the final stuff with everybody. Here's what your plates are going to look like. Here's what your stuff's going to look like. Here's how it's going to look when it's in the room. Here's how it's going to cover the room. Go through all the parts and pieces. Everybody can review it. Everybody can feel comfortable and sign off on that. And then, this is assuming a project that we're going to go to, do a full bid documents for, which is kind of the another step past the stuff we talked about previous.
Yeah.
But it's a full set of documents, and then we send those out to folks to contractors usually to bid on at that point. And that's where, to kind of circle back to where Todd was talking earlier, if you even if you sometimes know what you want, but it's a bigger project, and you want to make sure that what you're getting as far as quotes are going to be really as close as you can, apples to apples, and you want to get multiple numbers. For a bigger project, it can make a lot of sense to try and have a consultant do all the design stuff for it and have contractors bid on it, and then if you're in a spot particularly where you need to take a number or 3 numbers or 4 numbers, whatever your institution's thing is, hey, we got to have 3 numbers to be able to look at to make sure that we're getting a good value and a good quote and a good dollar. I think you can get both a very good design, and you can get the comfort of knowing that you got a good number on your bid actually.
Right.
So it's worthwhile for some folks to be able to do that at that point. And in some institutions, they're public institutions, you have to get multiple
Yeah, I was going to
bids.
say
Right.
that.
You don't have a choice.
Just about any K through 12 school
Yeah.
is required.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
it's,
have
it's,
to.
it's what is the minimum?
Yeah.
Or is it changed by
Michigan
district?
law varies by well, sometimes interpretation, I think, of Michigan law, and also not just Michigan, but Indiana other laws as well. It's usually in the neighborhood of about $25,000. Some
So-
places are a little under 20, some are a little more higher
That's what
than
I
that,
thought.
but
That
it's
was like
it's
20.
about that ballpark.
So basically, law states that if you are going to spend over 20, you have to buy
Yep. And people will
public
sometimes,
schools,
most public institutions will be like that, yeah.
not just schools, but
Governments and other places
Government,
like that.
yeah.
They're all in the same boat where
Agencies.
they've
Right.
got to do that.
Well, as you were describing your process, it's not very far from what
No.
Parkway would provide on their own, whether it was design, meeting with them, asking the right questions, making notes, and then putting together a proposal and a design and all of that. So what I want to bring up, because what you
well,
just
let
said
me
is
let me
amazing. Go
comment
ahead.
on that.
Go ahead.
It sounds a lot the same. We do the same kind of, but it's not nearly as detailed, and it's not nearly as structured. So
Right.
3 things that you just said, we may roll all into one.
Right, I would agree.
So it doesn't have the checks and balances usually along the way. Things are a little bit, we lump things more together. We may end up at the same place, but if it's, it's just it's kind of the same process, but just a different way of getting there.
Right.
Not nearly as detailed.
Well, your documents have to be that detailed because you're putting it out to other people to read.
Yep.
Exactly.
Whereas we can lump in our bolts and stage plates and all that into one single number.
Right.
We don't have to
right.
itemize all that.
And
Right.
remember,
So-
when Tim's, now I'm talking about the guy who looks at your
Right.
specs
Right.
and has to bid those.
Yeah.
What, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're trying to protect against the guy that's going to read that and finds a shortcut way of doing it and can do it right. You're trying to equalize the playing field.
I want everybody to
Right?
know that what they're looking at is going to be what they're going to
So
install.
If you miss
Yeah.
something,
Nice.
which we call a loophole
Yep.
in a specification, gives somebody an advantage because they found it and somebody didn't. So there's a lot more detail that you have to put into what you do than what we do.
Exactly
So,
correct.
At the end of the
Right.
day, we just look at our clients, the ones we have relationships and that just hire us, and that's really something I was going to talk about too. But those are the people that we have a relationship. They understand what we do. They know how we do it, and they're comfortable with it because we've done it for them before.
They know
Those
you're
are-
going to take care of it and you're going to make it
Absolutely.
happen.
And at the end of the day, if something doesn't go right, they know that we're going to come
We're gonna
back
make
and
it
fix
right.
it.
Mhm.
Right.
Right. With your projects, it's in there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to document because
Every
the contractor
little
is trying
bitty
to
thing.
do only
Well,
what's in there and not more.
Like Parkway would never do anything to try and get to the loophole. But there are other contractors that might try and find a loophole.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
We find a loophole every once in a
I
while.
know. You're
We
bidding-
try
you're-
not to exploit those
No, but
because
you're-
our goals are the same, which is why you're sitting at this table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody wants
Right.
to see a great system
Absolutely.
for the end user when we're all said and done.
Right.
Yeah, well, the one thing I wanted to talk about and bring up real quick, I've been technical director for various churches, and one of the things that I found is that when you go to a new church or a new area, when I moved to Seattle, moved to West Michigan, never lived in West Michigan, one of my things is networking is very, very important to me, right? So I got to know Parkway, I got to know various integrators in our area, and my belief is when you find somebody who does great work. Now, if it didn't go well, that's a different story. But if you end up seeing what a company does and they do incredible work, they're great to work with, the chemistry is good, they understand where you're going, and they already have a more in-depth and intimate knowledge of your systems and of your mission. And so after you kind of go through the vetting process, it's kind of like, well, I'm just going to work with them.
Yeah.
Because they understand us and
Yeah.
we understand them, and it's just easy.
Yeah.
Right? So can you guys speak a little bit into that and how that can really benefit a church? Because now I'm playing the devil's advocate and saying, okay, you've kind of gone through this process where maybe you've hired somebody like a Tim and you got 3 different specs, and then you ended up going, say, with Parkway. And oh my gosh, Parkway did an incredible job. We love Parkway, and they just get us, and so we're always going to work with Parkway. So when is that right to do, and when is it right to maybe open things back up again? And just to play devil's advocate in this conversation, because you can kind of get stuck in a rut if you just keep using the same integrator over and over and over again, or that can actually be a great relationship that can really be very beneficial for the organization so that they don't have to waste a lot of time, waste a lot of resources. Because when you think about having to get together a committee, say it's for a church, you have a lead pastor, an executive pastor, the elders, the financial board, the tech director, the worship pastor, all these different people that want to speak into this project, right? That's time, energy, and money from your budget, right? Because you're paying those people.
Yeah.
A lot
They're
of those
doing that
people.
instead of the job they're really
They're really
job
meant
they're
to
really
do.
supposed to
Right,
do.
right, exactly. And so when you finally find somebody that you're comfortable with, so when is that right?
Yeah. Well, let me throw a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
For what it's worth. So when I work with people who don't have an established relationship with contractors, I tell them, hey, we would like to be at the end of this project. I want you to have a long-term relationship with the contractor that's working on this job. Because that's really, I want them to have somebody that they know that they can trust, that they can go to when there's questions, when they need more gear, when they need stuff. So from my perspective, the real success, and it kind of works me out of a job to some degree, but if I do my job well and we have a great contractor that comes in and does a project and they never have to call me again because they've developed a good contractor relationship, that's a win. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to see people get great equipment and to work with good folks and to be able to get where they want to go. So, the longer that you can be part of that, in my opinion, I think that's fantastic.
Well, and on the flip side of that, if you, no matter how big the project is, if it was really that successful with the team that they had in place, right, between the contractor and the consultant, if that was a good process and it worked well, why not do it again?
Do it again.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what there are situations where we're both brought in, right, and not through a bid process.
Right. No, I think there are, and
So-
and I wish we had more chances to do it. Quite honestly,
I do
where,
too.
where we could work on more of an integrated project solution, where you can, because some people will appreciate the ability to work with the consultant on some of the design side, but don't want to go through all of the expense of having to document everything and put it to bid and do all that sort of stuff. And so I think there's great opportunities and possibilities. I wish more people would try to take advantage of that, where you could have somebody like myself who would work on the design side, and you can do that in conjunction with your contractor that you're going to have.
An
on the
integrator
project.
that you already work with.
You already know who you're going to work
Right,
with, and
right.
you may even know, hey, here's the potential solution that we want to have, big picture of what kind of PA system we want to have, and maybe we know what kind of mixing board we want to have. But we have a whole bunch of stuff in between those two parts that has to also work along the way, and somebody's got to figure all that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that, because when we do all that work up front and we don't get the job, the larger the project is, the bigger negative number we're creating.
Yep.
Right?
Certainly.
So if I walk into a project and I can, after a while you begin to tell, you can see this is going to be a big project, which, honestly, as a contractor, we want. We'd
Right.
love to do the big ones.
Right.
But if it looks like it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of engineering hours, right, to get this project to a point at which we can actually begin doing the work. Because remember, that's where our
Right.
profits are.
Right.
Is when we put guys' equipment on the job and guys' feet on the job. Everything before that is pure overhead.
Right.
And if that's a big thing, I'm like, Tim, I need to get you in here.
Right.
Right.
Because those things we naturally, just because of where our company wants us to do and wants us to be. Now, I got to clarify one thing you said, just so our listeners know that Parkway, unlike a lot of contractors, are not commission-based.
Sure.
We are not.
We are
No,
not.
we're not.
Just so we
Yes.
clear that up. So,
Us three,
We are not.
we don't get paid commission.
but we
Yes.
do have a goal.
Yes, we
Yes.
do have goals.
Our
Sure.
boss doesn't expect us to deliver X amount a year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. But anyway,
No, that's,
The-
but
the
there's-
point
but
is
there's
there's-
an important difference there. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
understanding, and this has taken me a while. I've had to grow over the years to understand that, to look at what we do and how we do it and understand what you deliver to the market and what your expertise is and where your focus is not exactly where ours is, right?
Mhm.
So our goal is to get in the door, design something that works, and get it installed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's bad, but the least amount of time we can spend, not least amount of time, tons of meeting with multiple people and throughout, and just it could be a struggle to get us there all the time.
yeah.
I mean, we know we have to do design because our goal is to give you a quality system, and we're going to do everything we can
Absolutely.
and need to do to get that.
Mm-hmm.
But you, on the other hand, that is your expertise. That's where you shine, where we don't,
And-
because that's
and-
where you're geared.
And
So,
working with groups and committees and architects, that's the stuff I like to do.
exactly.
And there are wonderful architects that are in the industry and folks I work with, but we spend a lot of time working through the finer points and details of a lot of stuff that takes time. And from an
Lots of
integrator's
time.
perspective, I mean, time is money for you, and
Mhm.
you're like you said, Todd, you're throwing it away on the front side.
it's not good and bad. It's just understanding where our money is made and where your dollars are made.
Yep.
And that's where your focus is going to be. That's just a natural thing,
Yep.
right? So,
Yep.
and they're in
Indeed.
different areas.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah. I mean, piggybacking off of that, I would say though, at the same time is we take every opportunity to meet with our clients to clarify any questions that they may have. That is kind of what we do. But that being said, when you have $1 million project versus a $50,000 project, the details of those things are drastically different, right? And so having to go through a $1 to $2 million project versus a $50,000 to $100,000 project, those look totally different.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to be able to use everything at your disposal in order to make the project a success.
And not just that, but what does the customer need? If you have a client that really wants a lot of hand holding, a ton of detail through all those processes, And that can be challenging for us, right? Because we're going to end up spending as much engineering time as we are in installation time.
Right.
Right. Which is that's not where we're geared. But if that client needs that kind of detail through the process, that's a great place to have a consultant.
Right. Yeah.
Whether through a bid process or teaming up together, either way.
Yeah, so I'm already hearing that on both sides. Sometimes it makes sense to go directly with an integrator like Parkway. Sometimes we, as Parkway, are going to be like, you know what? It might be to your benefit to get somebody like Tim involved. So we're going to push that way. And sometimes it's going to make sense for a church to say, hey, we need to find a consultant because we're going to want to bid this out to several integrators or contractors. Obviously, schools have to do that. And so there's a reason for all of us to be working together simultaneously in order to benefit the end user who's our customer.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the other one I'd throw on there too is to say that timing can be an important part of that. So if you have a project that needs to go fast, it's hard to make a hiring a consultant and going through a design and a bid and a build process. That's hard to do if you're on a tight time frame.
That's true.
Because I will have folks that will call me. I mean, and they'll say, "Hey, yeah, we have to have this in 3 weeks," and I will tell them, I'm happy to give you some names. I mean, it's not that I don't want to work with you. I would be happy to, but I cannot get you something that's on paper and get it bid for you and get it installed in a short time frame. There has to be more time in that. And so when people have a specific time deadline that they are on, it makes a lot more sense to work with an integrator and do
versus like getting a consultant because you have so much happening. Right,
it
might have a limited amount of time.
It's just not even back to what Todd was saying. It's not even that I have that much happening. It's just that to go through the steps of sitting down, talking about the stuff, massaging it, making sure everybody's happy with it, getting it on paper. That
takes 3 weeks in and of itself.
It takes time.
Exactly. You're really writing a mini book in that. That period.
Yeah. You are, and
some of the how big are some of these spec books?
Oh, I mean, you can be hundreds of pages if you're not careful. Yeah.
So
most of my part of it's usually not that much, but but you can easily be through. Yeah,
it could be 30, 40 pages.
40, 50 pages is not uncommon, depending on how much stuff is there. And
That's a lot of writing.
The bigger the design, the more stuff that has to go into it.
Right.
So when you need to move quickly on stuff, you really have to work with an integrator much more directly. And if somebody wants to have a consultant be part of that project, you could at that point. But the more that part of it shifts too, where you're on a deadline. You have to, Todd, I love the way how you kind of said that, where you got to kind of chunk things together and put it and make it go, and that becomes much more critical to be able to do, to say, and there are projects, I know that you guys do them all the time, that come up where somebody's like, okay, we have 2 weeks, and you don't have as much time to put everything together in a quote and stuff up front. You have to kind of lump things and say, you're going to have this and you're going to have this. And if you got a relationship and everybody knows, hey, we're going to make it happen and we're going to do it at a fair price and we're going to get it in on time, we're going to take care of what needs to go. You by necessity of the time frame, you have to go faster. And that's that. I don't, my work and stuff doesn't fly in that anywhere near as well.
I think we completed a couple of projects recently where that was the case. Like, they called me up. They said, we want to be up by July 26th. Like, okay, let's do it.
But they also have the people in place that can make decisions quickly.
They do.
Right? And they probably have a pretty good idea what they want.
Right.
And that's key.
And that helps.
Right. Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. If you're still trying to figure out what you want and you have to be there in 2 weeks, then they need to put the brakes on and say, no, we need to take some time to figure out what this is going to be.
So I have a question. I'm curious, Tim, when you go through, you go through the consultant process, the integrator gets hired, they do the job, they do the install. What does it look like for you on the back end of that job?
Yeah. Usually it looks like on the back side of it, I mean, we've typically been on the project a couple of times while things are being installed. So we know what's going on. We get to the end of the project, we do a walkthrough, we look through all the racks, we look through all the wiring, look through the plates, look through how everything's put together, look at the speakers, look at the hang, look at all the parts and pieces. I write up a punch list of any of the stuff that's in there that maybe isn't quite the way that it's supposed to be. And that's general. I mean, that's every project. Yeah. There's always little things that are not. If I get to the second or third page of the punch list, then we have real problems that should have been addressed much earlier. in a process. And it is, I will say this, it is very dependent on how good a contractor is. Some contractors that are very good will go really quick, because the stuff, it's just all there. And there are others where it's a longer process, and you go through more and you write down more stuff. And it's not even always necessarily the contractor. It is very dependent even, if you have somebody it's the first time running a project as the lead installer, they may have not picked up everything that they might have.
A lot of variables.
Sure.
Yeah, the
of
crew that you
variables.
have on site can make a big difference as to how much of that stuff there kind of is. And so it's not even just that it's the particular contractor. It may even be the individual crew that you have.
Right.
That's there.
Do you have the A crew there, the B crew there, the train
Sure.
crew there? Yeah.
And the guys that have been in it longer or shorter,
Yeah.
there's
It's usually a mixture, right?
there's
I would
usually a
hope.
mixture, and sometimes maybe they left the guy that shouldn't have been in
Yeah.
charge on the project.
Well,
the
and
way
we all
through.
know rack wiring is a skilled art.
It's an art form.
It's
It
an
really
art
is,
form.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a dying art.
There's
It's a
nothing
dying art.
sexier. There's nothing sexier than like when you see something just done so well. You're just like,
Like, man,
That
that's
is
good.
amazing.
That's
Oh,
well
yeah.
done.
yes.
I'm like, man, you spent this is a great looking rack.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is something.
well, and not only that, when you need to go troubleshoot,
Oh, it's so much nicer.
oh,
when it's
yeah.
forget
wow.
about it.
Proper labels,
Yeah.
I'm a stickler for labels on projects, and almost
Yeah.
every project I'll find at least one spot where people have not labeled it quite right. We'll do a punch list. Sometimes, we'll almost always we'll do some sort of actual commissioning of the speaker system too. So we'll sit down and we'll get out some hardware and some software, and we'll look at how the system's performing, look through the processor, look at the settings. The more that the manufacturer has pre-built settings that are supposed to go for the speakers, the less of that you have to do. But I still go
Mhm.
through almost every room, and I look at it,
Double
and
check.
evaluate, and just
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
does it really sound the way that it's supposed to? Does
Right.
it look on screen when we look at the readouts? Does it look the way that it's supposed to?
It's never set it and forget it.
Almost.
It just
never.
never is, right? I mean, how many times has it been like, oh yeah, we put the setting on and that's it, we could walk away? Probably pretty rare.
It's rare.
It gets close,
There's some
but it's
that are
probably
close
need
to
a
it.
little tweaking, right?
Well, it's the same with lighting and cameras. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to tweak that. You got to make the cameras look good with
Yep.
the lighting.
yep.
All
Yep.
that.
Yep. All
Yep.
sorts of stuff. So then the same for video and lighting stuff too. We go through and make the
Yeah.
punch list. We check the settings. We check the tweak. We go and we look at where everything is and how it's supposed to be, and make sure it's all exactly what it's supposed to be. And if there's somebody there from the owner, the client, who's a knowledgeable tech person, it's great when they come along with that process as well.
Mhm.
Walk alongside, and they can see everything, and they can have input onto stuff.
They
And
kind of know what they want.
because
or
at
know
the
what
end of the
they're looking
day,
for.
at the end of the day, it's not my system.
Right.
It's not your system.
It's the end users.
They're the one that has to use it, and so
Right.
I want them to
We
be
don't-
happy with it.
We don't want to be there every day.
No,
we
you don't.
We want them to own it.
I want them to own it.
Yeah.
I want them to be happy with it. And
Yeah.
So the more they're involved in that process, the better off that is.
I tell every
usually.
client there's only one Sunday I can mix a week. I can't be at five
Can't be
churches.
here.
And I know where you usually are.
Yeah, exactly. You're never available.
Right.
Well, what I'm hearing from this conversation and the previous episode, part one, if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to part one, because it's kind of a segue heading into this episode. But is that there's, it's kind of like Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything.
Oh,
Season
wow.
for everything.
Quoting scripture.
dang, baby.
Yeah.
Come on.
But there is a time for everything. There's a time to just kind of maybe do it yourself, right?
Speak it,
If,
Pastor
if
Christian.
all you got to do is put up a television in a little office and put a little Google Chromecast into it, that might be something you want to do yourself,
Yeah.
right? Maybe. But then there's a time where you want to bring an integrator like Parkway in to help design and help dream with you and help put together a system and install a system that is going to be perfect for your situation. And then there's going to be times where you're going to want to bring in a consultant like Tim to really help be an unbiased voice as you're looking at a large project, and then maybe bring in multiple integrators so that you can find the perfect partnership in order to get the best results. That's kind of what I'm hearing through this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing we always say. We want to be hired on a project because of our reputation,
Right.
right? If the client doesn't have a reputation, and maybe they've had some bad things before, I think it's, I don't, right? Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
good time to bring in a consultant to help you get to someone that has a reputation you're happy with. It's a whole lot better avenue than going the wrong way and getting burned.
Right.
That's
Which
we can all
happens.
agree we don't want that. to
Which
happen.
happens,
But
yeah.
There's a whole nother scenario that we're not even, we make it sound like the end user is bringing you in, but I know there's a lot of cases that you don't meet the end user because you're brought in by a large architectural firm,
Yes.
engineering firm,
Yep.
and we don't even know the project's going on. This is something that's a whole brand new facility on paper, and you're part of that whole process, which is,
That's a whole nother.
that's
a new one.
Yeah, that's like
Right.
more work than we ever want to do.
Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
and that's a lot of your work.
That actually
too.
is a lot of the work I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
is
So we
working
don't-
on spaces that are an architect
Not even built yet.
They're not even built. An architect has got a project that they're working on for a client, and
this is the way the process happens. It just doesn't.
It's
Right.
all got to be designed. It's
you
all
know
gotta
where
be bid
this
and built.
AV system is a
small
$200,000
Yeah.
sliver of a $10
$5 million.
million
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
project. So yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
and that's I know it's a lot what you do.
That is
And,
that's the largest percentage of
right.
of the projects that we.
So I
work
just
on.
want to make sure our listeners understand it's not like we're out there deciding on every job who should do what.
No,
Right.
A lot of
No,
that
no,
is
right.
a lot of that is dictated long before we ever get a sniff
Right.
of anything
Absolutely.
from either side. So
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, any final thoughts that you guys have that you might want to add, Tim, that on your side on your end of things, or even on the integrator side, as we begin to wrap up?
I just appreciate you guys having me in today. Quite
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah.
it's fun
Thanks
to
for
have
coming in.
it's fun to have a discussion and a conversation about this. And I'm with Todd that there is a little bit of gray area where our stuff overlaps, but by and large, I think we all get along really well with stuff, and it's nice to be able to work on projects and to have some relationships to be able to co-work on things and do projects. And I think there's great ways for us to be able to synergize and to talk about, hey, this stuff works great and that works great. And so, it's really fun to come in and just talk a little bit with you. So
Thanks for being
me.
here, man.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. And at the end of the day, I think we can all agree it's all about doing great work.
Yes.
well,
We never want to be known for doing subpar things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we are committed. I know the three of us, I'm sure you are as well, that we want to do our best work so that people get the best results possible.
Mhm.
And that, in the end of the day, is what we do, why we do what we do, right?
yeah,
Agreed.
that's probably why
Agreed.
we can all sit here and talk about it.
Mhm.
And I've appreciated, your input to the industry, Tim, for many years in this area. I don't know that there's probably another consultant that would actually sit at the table with me. Number one, I've probably driven some spikes in between a few over my years in business, but
Nobody's
just so our
perfect.
listeners understand, that's because at the end of the day, I tend to side with the client, and I've had some bad situations with consultants, not on my standpoint, but the client did, and I've been asked to go in and redo what a consultant has done. And I can say that I've never had to do that with you, Tim. And I think a big part of that is, and if you're in our industry and you hear integrators talk, you'll hear them say, that the guy designs a system, right? And then they make money by just cookie cuttering that same
Right,
design
over
and
and
sell
over
it
and
to
over and
everybody
over
because they
again,
don't have
yeah.
to do the work again.
Yep.
And that's like us doing the same thing. It doesn't fit in our industry.
It doesn't.
Everything.
Everything's
And I know,
custom.
Tim, you don't do that, and I've appreciated that. You write a very. I used to call it a necessary evil. I don't anymore. Okay, so I've grown.
Moved out of the evil category. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll say if I don't work on a lot
get
of
real.
specs. I'm not in the bid market, but when I do have to bid something and look at a set of specs, I can look at yours and I know exactly what you want.
Well, you hear from the other guys I'm sure in your office who do bid on the stuff.
Yes.
And they say the same thing.
Yeah.
When we open your spec book, there's not a lot of gray area. I mean, I wish I could say which one I'm working on right now from another consultant, and I will not mention it, but it is so gray that we've had to ask so many questions that the project may not even happen.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about it is I don't even want to know, but I have a very sneaking idea, suspicion of how much this consultant is being paid to do this. And it just, it's crazy.
So
on the side of that, If I got a bid a spec, I want to bid yours because I
I'll
open up.
take that as a compliment.
And our guys will tell you they can whip through.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't take a lot of time to bid your jobs
And-
because it's black and white. You
and
don't
I
have
want-
to think about it.
And I want contractors when we go through the full process of design and bidding, I want contractors to feel like what you're bidding is a fair bid against everybody else.
Mm.
Yeah,
That you're,
well, that's
that you're
what
not,
you're there to
that
do.
you're not going to
Right.
have gotchas. That you know
Right.
that you can put a number to it and you can feel confident about it, and nobody's going to
Equal the
surprise
playing
you.
field.
Yeah, and you got a nice level playing field for stuff.
Well, what I'm hearing from what you said and what you said just now is that there's different levels of integrators. So vet your integrators, and that there's different levels of consultants. So
Also
vet
true.
those, get
Do your
recommendations,
research
do your
either way.
research. Don't just go with whoever you found in on Google. I was gonna say Yellow Pages, but nobody uses that
Nobody
anymore.
uses that anymore.
Yeah, but there's levels to the
Yeah.
game,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
There's different levels to everything. You can be building a house, and everybody's at a different level.
Mhm.
And so do your homework. And we're available to always be kind of a place where you can ask questions and figure out what's best for your next project. Tim, you as well. So don't be afraid to reach out. I really, truly believe, and I think we all do, is that collaboration is the key to successful ventures, right? The best idea in the room is always going to win. Why? Not because it came from a particular person, but because it's the best idea, right?
Right.
And so I believe all of us collaborating together is always going to be a benefit for our customers. And so, but Tim, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Yeah, it's been
You're
great.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.